It's time to refresh your yard during spring backyard days at the Home Depot. Get low prices guaranteed on propane grills starting at $179, like the Next Grill 3-burner gas grill. Or get $50 off a select Weber Spirit Grill and bring big flavor to your backyard. Then set the scene with Hampton Bay string lights that bring it all together. Shop spring backyard days for 7 days at the Home Depot, now through May 6th. Exclusions apply. See homedepot.com/price match for details.
You can't reason with the sun. Trust us, we've tried. This summer, it's time to put that angry ball of fire on mute. Columbia's OmniShade technology is engineered to protect you from the sun's harsh rays that can burn and damage your skin. The sun is relentless, but so is our gear. Level up your summer at Columbia.com to spend more time outside and less time slathering on aloe lotion. You're welcome. Columbia, engineered for whatever.
Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I am entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by Eric Hersey here on our 101 podcast. It doesn't sound quite as good when you say it like that, right?
Well, this one more, 101 is what we call it, so it'll be very educational. It's today.
There we go. For those of you who are math challenged out there. By the way, last week's show, we mentioned that the cast of Weekend on Broadway was kind enough to wish us well for the 100th episode of this podcast, so we wanted to return the favor. And again, we're contractually obligated to mention Wicked in every show. But it turns out the folks on Broadway are actually taking part on this rather cool free public thing that's going to be happening at Rockefeller Center next month. This is a month-long series of live performances called Road to Broadway. And they start on May 14th and run through June 4th. And it's from noon to 1. It's the cast of various Broadway shows appear on the rink at Rockefeller Center. It's going to be transformed into an open-air stage. And for the first time they do this, Thursday, May 14th, it's going to be the cast of Hadestown, Chicago, and a tiny little show, maybe you've heard of it, Wicked. But again, that's from noon to 1, and they advise you to get there early to get the best spot. So if you happen to be in New York on May 14th, head on over to Rockefeller Center before noon and say hello to our friends from Wicked.
Yeah, and I want to know how this counts as their record, because they mentioned last week what it was, 8,700. What is this? Is this a fraction? Does this count? I want to, we're going to have to check here.
Very cool.
Well, we'll find out. But hey, Jim, did you know that the lovely folks out there have kept giving us reviews? We're on 101 and we're still beating that. We're plus 6 right now because we're at 107. So
wow.
So we thanks everybody. And I said we'll keep reading them as long as they keep coming. So I'll get a couple on here today. But real quick, we have a really exciting show. We have Chris Cox on the second half of the show.
Yes.
Came back from Epic, got all the news, all the information. So anybody that's interested, so stay with us for that.
Yes.
But we have a little bit of news and a little bit of thank yous up front. Let's start with Go Ducks 1981, giving us a wonderful review. My go-to podcast for Universal Orlando. I've been listening since episode 1 and consider this podcast a great way to keep up on what's going on in the parks between visits. I like the updates, history stories. Also, made a suggestion to see if we would do a deep dive into the history of the holiday season at the parks. I've been at the holidays in Grinchmas and would like to know how it started, and maybe another interesting topic about the Orlando Informer event. So a great podcast, hoping for many more. Well, thank you so much. Go Ducks. I will tell you, episode 79, we talk about Jim Carrey becoming the Grinch and how hellacious that was. So that's very Christmas related. And then episode 29, we talk about the Earl the Squirrel origin story. So maybe come December, Jim and I can rack up some more holiday, history stories and throw them your way. So keep listening.
Yeah, I mean, what might be interesting is if we make a good solid run at Grinchmas at the Universal Parks. Because again, it was on the back of the Jim Carrey film that
Right.
really became a thing.
Yeah, so we got that in the notes. So we'll look around. Of course, we want to talk holidays, kind of around holidays. So since this is theme park, that could be anywhere from October 31st.
There we go. There we go. I mean, I always make that joke. If you live down in Orlando, you tell time differently than other folks. For example, if you see the Halloween billboards, oh, it's August.
Yeah.
And if you
Right.
see, the Christmas billboards, oh, it's October.
That's it. When one more here, we'll get Mickey Mouse Pez says epic stuff like how Eric began his journey. I'm going to camp on being Universal curious. I find the show to be entertaining and informative. It's a great listen. So once again, thank you guys. And if you still want to continue to give us reviews, it is a good way that we get our name out there and other people to listen. You head to jimhillmedia.com/epic. It'll take you right to the Apple review page and you can leave. So thanks again to Go Ducks and Mickey Mouse Pez, and we'll read some more next week.
Okay, and we do have some news before we get to our feature interview with Chris Cox. But before we do that, we of course have to acknowledge our sponsor, and that is unlockmagic.com. And if you're planning a trip to Universal Orlando or Walt Disney World, check out Unlock Magic. Listeners to the Epic Universal podcast are saving up to 12% on theme park tickets and now have the ability to purchase Express Pass through Unlock Magic, saving even more money. So be sure and visit unlockmagic.com and save today. So now to get to the news, this I'm not gonna lie, Eric, kind of bums me out because I didn't get to the Epic Universe Preview Center before it went away. It was one of those things where it was on my list of, I need to go, especially to check out the model, which had that cool hold up your phone QRL code thing. And I did not go, and now I guess that part of it is gone, right?
Well, you and I are in different camps here, Jim, because I was excited to see, because I never knew it before the Epic Universe preview show. So for all those wondering, the Universal has the Legacy store back, and if I'm correct, that's what it was there before. So they had a Legacy. Is that right, Jim?
Yeah, and again, what's kind of interesting again, that Epic or the Universal Parks have been around since June of 1990, and there's enough stuff that has gone to that big theme park in the sky that they can have a Legacy store, and they had some genuinely cool stuff in there, Jaws shirts and Back to the Future and all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, and I've kind of been saying this. I think the one thing that Universal has always kind of envied Disney was that Disney has a lot of nostalgia, and Universal hasn't been able to do that. But I think they can literally lay into it now, because us 90s kids, I bought the Universal jacket. I got the black, pink, and blue jacket that's with the original stuff. We're all kind of into that because it's our childhood, the Nickelodeon Studios, stuff like that. So I think this is a great addition. So I'm really excited to go see this. But they basically have the Legacy store open now, and of course you're seeing things like Back to the Future and Jaws, but they have these nice little photo op props as well. So did you get to see any of the cool photo ops?
You included photos in the show notes here, and I gotta say, just the ET one alone, holy cow, that's great. But the Jaws one is fun as well. Now I'll definitely go in there. It bums me out though that I didn't get to see that model.
I want to know where the model is. Where do they keep those? Because all these models got to be put somewhere. I'm I
know I've told you the story about stumbling upon the model for the earliest iteration of Islands of Adventure.
Yeah.
And that was upstairs at Lombard's Landing over, back when that used to be part of the San Francisco area. I guess it still is. So, maybe we.
Well, Jim, we're just gonna go exploring. We're just gonna go exploring and find this model and see if it's still around.
Go check out that conference room. See if that's where this model wound up. So
no. So I will check that out. But I think everybody, if you get a chance, go check it out. Get some pictures, send them our way. So lots of cool artwork.
So all right, now we switch from the East Coast to the West Coast because this FanFest 2026 is up and running at Universal Studios Hollywood. And lots of people taking videos. What do you think so far?
Oh, well, I spent the last couple days actually just watching vlogs, listening to podcasts. I was like, I'm really mad that I'm not there, but it's we've already been on the West Coast. We're going out the West Coast a little later. Just did not seem to happen because I think there's 13 nights. I think there's 12 more maybe at the time of posting. Who knows? There's not that many nights here for Universal Fan Fest, so it's a limited thing. You got to kind of be in. It seems to be made for the regional, and
in fact, it was, again, one of the things that Eric and I genuinely appreciated is that so many of the content creators on the West Coast seem to have, some of them were there actually not even for the first night. They were there for preview night. Did you see?
I listened to a podcast today. I think it's For Your Amusement, two guys that I just discovered it this year. Really good one. And I just listened to their podcast and they were there for the press and there was all types. So I'm very happy that people are covering this because I got to check some out. Did you get to check out any of any of the displays or any of the walkthroughs?
I did. I especially because, again, face it, the gold standard coming out of the original FanFest in 2025 seems to have been the Back to the Future experience down in Courthouse Square. So, they were really hoping that the Scooby-Doo and the Universal Monsters mystery would, equal that. And what's kind of interesting is they kept hyping the fact that, this is the first time they've opened Little Europe, where all of the Universal Monsters movies were made back in the 30s and the 40s. And not to be the party pooper, but I'm pretty sure that burned down.
Well, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, Jim.
No, that's it exactly. But I got to say, what I saw, it looked like a fun experience. And as somebody who grew up, I watched, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? When it debuted. I want to say 68 as part of the CBS Saturday morning lineup. And what I loved is, somebody did their homework. All of the area music that was playing was, the Hanna-Barbera music that had been created for the TV show. And, they stayed true to the conceit of a film production. Did you see, for example, that each of the individual members of the team, Fred and Shaggy and Velma, were in, I want to say, what was it? Shaggy was, at the wardrobe tent, and Fred might have been in the video village. They stayed true to what a film set really is like, but at the same time, what was kind of cool was to have the legitimate Universal Monsters wandering around. In fact, I saw a couple of interactions with the folks there, and I think they did overall a great job.
Yeah, and I think so. I guess this so last year was you kind of walked around and there were scenes of Back to the Future and you got to witness this. This year is a little bit more hands-on where you're trying to solve a mystery. So I've heard people pro and cons there, and I think it just all depends on how you like your entertainment. If you're a scavenger hunt person, then you really enjoyed this. So I heard a lot of people saying, I really like this, so forth. And then I heard people saying, I just kind of want to sit back and watch kind of deal. So, and last year's Back to the Future kind of had that a little bit better. But I think overall, I think the immersion was cool. I think I've heard positive things about that experience, and that is kind of like the highlight. But once again, there is multiple things. I think one of the busiest and kind of lived up to the hype. Did you see anything about the Forbidden Forest Search of the Hippogriff?
Yeah. In fact, what was fascinating to me, I don't know if you which of the videos you did, but they used a lot of the Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey cue.
Yep.
I want to say right up until you got to the greenhouse, you were in the attraction. And then suddenly, you're exiting the building. You're going into the Forbidden Forest. And I thought, overall, based on the videos that I saw, they did a good job. In fact, I loved for example, the moment at the relatively close to the start of, your tour, where the notion was, well, how do we light this up? I mean, it's supposed to be out in the forest at night, and how do we deal with we're going to ask people to walk around in the dark, and no, you lean into the Harry Potter mythology, and it's like, you got your wands? Okay, everybody, with me, Lumos, and the forest lights up, and it's like, oh, okay, somebody was clever, somebody paid attention to the Potter world. And then I thought the reveal of the centaur was great. I thought how they handled the pixies, and to be honest, even the puppet for the hippogriff was very impressive. It looked like that was very well handled. I mean, I did hear that was one of the longer lines of the evening.
90 minutes, if not longer for some, yeah.
Yeah. On the other hand, I don't know, did you get to see... because the two of us folks, when Eric and, the rest of the Herseys and myself spent a day at Universal, we made a point of going to the Waterworld stunt show just because, again, I wanted them to see this thing that existed for 30 years, but at the same time, we were curious because we had heard that One Piece was going to be doing a stunt show in this same space. And did you get to watch the stunt show at all?
I didn't watch the whole stunt show. I mean, I got to see lots of pieces of that. Now, I'm not super familiar with One Piece, but I do know enough of it, and I know Alice is a big fan, so I take that as like, hey, this is a good product, So, but I did see some. Jim, did you?
Again, thanks to my daughter who introduced me to One Piece years ago. I mean, I was familiar enough with the characters and what they did, and it was one of these things where they really did a brilliant job of adapting the Waterworld space to making it a venue that they could bring the One Piece characters in. And, if you know the shows at all, whether the new live action thing that's been created or all of the years and years of the anime series, I thought they did a really great job. And, the audience was clearly filled with One Piece fans, and they were having a blast as well.
I heard people saying that they were kind of like, out of the people in costumes and the fans that showed up, the One Piece fans showed up hardcore. They were all cosplay, and so it's one of those things where I'm like, the more they talk about it, I'm like, I'm going to have to try this out. I'm going to have to see like what this is all about.
I think. Well, now remember, we in fact we shared them here on this podcast. We did see surveys for an East Coast version of this thing. I think the Universal Orlando folks are still trying to sort out where this might fit in their operating schedule, because face it, between Grinchmas and Mardi Gras and of course Halloween Horror Nights, there's not a lot of windows of time, and especially when you think about how Universal Florida spends a good 2/3 of the year either in the process of tearing down the previous year's mazes or building the ones for the coming years. So just be interesting to see where they slot this. I have to assume if they did it would end up over at IOA.
I would think. I mean, well, there could be a possibility where you have like there's the overlap where they're trying to do the houses over in Universal, and in Iowa they have it running. So I mean, I don't know. This is same quality caliber of Halloween Horror Nights, so they're just leaving money on the table if they don't do something. But a couple of so the Dungeons and Dragons was pretty much the exact experience as last year, which was all highly rated. So I mean, people really, and I I watched a little bit more of that, and just a wonderful experience. And again, that's Jim Henson's Creature Shop, Xanathar, beautiful. It's just super cool.
Very smart of them to reuse that again, because that thing was very impressive.
Yeah. And then I think there were some Yoshis floating around, and there's scavenger hunt. And the Jurassic World, we talked about that a couple weeks ago, but the characters were out, and this is like that whole area that is on the lower lot that they built, that they let pretty much everybody in before over the last couple weeks. This was all lit up nice, and the characters were out there. And that was kind of like an added surprise. And then the last thing was there was a Sailor Moon show and a Sailor Moon meet and greet, and I'm just like, I don't know much about Sailor Moon, so that might be
I have to admit, now this is in the DreamWorks Theater. This is where the Kung Fu Panda show is done during the day, and this was, I want to say, created for the Universal Park in Osaka.
Okay.
And again, it's a little trippy. I'm not as familiar myself with Sailor Moon, and so it was, suddenly all of her friends, Sailor Jupiter and such show up, and it's like, okay, well, cool. And they seem to be threatened by an evil woman with a disco ball butt, and it's just like, okay, I just roll with it. But that's it's kind of like going to a buffet, folks. Sometimes they can't all be things that you're completely enthusiastic about, but you're trying new things, all right?
And the meet and greet for Sailor Moon, I guess, was ridiculously long.
Oh, and more to the point, if you watch the show, and how the audience in the DreamWorks Theater is responding to this Sailor Moon show, the fans are there and they're loving it. So it's just, and again, I'm not here to yuck your yum. If that's your thing, Sailor Moon, and it's part of this, and you had a great time, bully for you. But just remember, this time last year, though, that's the thing. One Piece was literally just a meet and greet, and now it's this giant stunt show. So it will be interesting to see, what FanFest 3 in 2027 is.
Listen, I just want FanFest 1 in Orlando. So let's figure out what that is.
Well, okay. And speaking of Orlando, when we get back from this break, again, what's fascinating, just a little bit of setup here. So Chris Cox, our friend from the Case For with Chris Cox, that's the other podcast I do with Len Testa. He and his family, for the very first time, went down and experienced Epic Universe, stayed at the Helios Hotel. And what I mentioned this as part of the show, what I find fascinating is that Eric and his family, you got in there for the annual pass holder preview, right? And so what's interesting is that basically a year apart, these two guys experienced the same theme park. And it's a fun listen to them compare and contrast. But we'll get started with that in just a sec. But before we do that, there's this.
We all have that dream trip we've been wishing we could go on, but too often life, or usually price, gets in the way. That's why Priceline is here to help you turn your dream trip into reality. With up to 60% off hotels and up to 50% off flights, you can book everything you need for your next adventure. Don't just dream about that next trip. Book it with Priceline. Download the Priceline app or visit Priceline.com and book your next trip today.
Go to your happy price, Priceline.
And we're back. Okay, folks, so we've talked about Epic Universe before on this podcast, but today we have somebody else joining us. Chris Cox, an award-winning mentalist, mind reader, and more to the point, if you listen to the other shows here at Jim Hill Media, he is, of course, the co-host with Len and myself on our new show, The Case For with Chris Cox, and in fact, on the most recent episode of that, Chris, you were actually talking about getting ready for this trip, which was going to be your very first trip to what Universal calls its fourth theme park. So how did that go?
Yeah, you're right, Jim. Hello, Jim. Hi, Eric. You're right. On the most recent episode, you can hear me and Len arguing the case for deluxe resorts at Universal Orlando with the Right Honourable. It's weird to have you not in judge mode today, Jim. It's nice that you took the robes off for it.
Oh, well, they're out being dry cleaned, that we'll have them back for the next show.
Yeah.
But now, let's start with the basics here. So how long was this trip to Universal?
So we had 5 days, give or take. So we got in Wednesday mid-afternoon into Universal. We landed at like 2 p.m. maybe 3 p.m. into Orlando Airport. So we did 2 nights at Grand Helios Hotel. We then moved for a night at the Portofino Bay Hotel. We then moved for a night at Stella Nova Hotel, and then we had a morning, and then we flew out. So it was 5 very intense days in the Universal Resort.
Wow. Okay. And again, just to be clear here, this was your very first time at Epic Universe, right?
That's right. We've done the other parks, we've done the other hotels, but it was our first time in the Epic campus.
And just to lay down your bona fides here, now, you have been going to the Universal Parks in Orlando for how long?
I never like to reveal my age because I prefer to keep it like the one on Wikipedia. But I went when I was 8 years old for the first time. So I went to the original Universal Studios park where the Jaws ride was open but not quite open, where the parking lot was a chain link fence, where now there is a river. And then I also, I visited a lot as a child, as we did from the UK in those years. And I went to Islands of Adventure when it was in its previews, and I visited those parks throughout the years. So in particular, the kind of North Universal campus, there was nothing new there for me to enjoy. Epic Universe did last year when I was in Orlando. Its first preview day was the day I left Orlando, so I missed it then. So it's my first time visiting Epic, despite being very well accustomed to both the Universal and the Disney parks.
Now, speaking of which, I want to point something out here that Eric, you and your family, you actually made it into the first preview of Epic Universe, right? The park itself didn't open till May 22nd, but they started doing previews April 17th or thereabouts. So, I'm getting that right?
Yeah, I think Chris and I just walked past each other and didn't even recognize it. He must have been on his way out and I was on my way in. Yeah, no,
you were landing, I was taking off.
That's it. We waved to each other in the airplane.
Okay. So I have to admit, that fascinates me. The notion of that, for all intents and purposes, Chris, your first experience at this park was 1 year in after they effectively, tore open the wrapper. So how did it feel?
It's the headline is, I had a great time, and I feel like I was really excited about visiting, and I was very careful about trying not to get too many spoilers. And the park is beautiful. It excited me to see it. We had a wonderful time in it. I think particularly at night, it has that magical feel that Disney give you. It felt really special. And that is in spite of itself. I think there are lots of things, but I think people, it's the same story over and over, and people know those stories, and we'll probably go through a few of them, but there are operational issues which it probably shouldn't be having a year in. And there were many times, I would say, that park tried to ruin our day. But overall, we had a great time. And there are reasons which we'll get into as to why we did that. But the big things, I think, are just, it is a beautiful park. The rides are, on the whole, are fantastic. The ones which I think aren't so great, I'm sort of happy that they exist, because I can't wait to see what they do with that technology now they've done it once. I think you need a bit of that in the world of theme parks. I'm excited. The food was great, particularly compared to a lot of the rest of the Universal resorts. I think the entertainment was strong. The park was beautiful. I enjoyed walking around it. I loved the hotels. We had a really good time as a family. There was something for everyone. And the thing I think overall is that I'm excited that, if we think about it, Epic, everything there was designed 8 years ago, maybe. So I can't wait to see what Universal do next based on that gap between the two now.
Okay. Now, just to double back to, so you started your trip. You checked into the Helios. So your initial entrance into the park was from that hotel, from the back of the house, right?
Yes. It was. And that, originally I'd booked us in for 2 nights at Stella Nova, but I kept checking the price on a daily basis, and suddenly the dynamic pricing is wild at Universal, and suddenly the price for Helios, never quite could work it out, suddenly dropped, where it worked out, at the time I booked it, it was pretty much the same price as if I'd booked Stella Nova then, and ended up costing me maybe $100 a night more than Stella Nova. And I wondered whether that would be worth it. And within the first hour in the park, I was like, that is the best money I've spent, is changing that hotel. Because the hotel, I think, it's a nice hotel. It's beautiful in its way. It's quite millennial. It's, there's not a huge amount that sets it apart from like a nice, Marriott Courtyard where they've got all the furniture by West Elm. But it feels like the room sizes are good. It's well proportioned. It's a perfectly lovely hotel. It is, and you notice the difference definitely when we then did one night at Stella Nova. I was like, oh yeah, I can see the difference in price point, be it the branded shampoo or everything being slightly bigger or the touch panels to control the room. However, being dropped in that hotel, checking into our room, and a few minutes later being in the theme park, in the heart of the action, is a total game changer. And I can see I would happily spend that money to do that again. There was a point where we were in Toad Cafe and Aurora realised she'd left her water bottle back in the room. And 7 minutes later, I was in the room picking that water bottle up. That is, I'm like, that's amazing that I can do that. It's so, and there was a point where the rain came in and a load of rides were down on the next day. And we were like, you know what, should we just pop back to the hotel and go for the pool, go in the pool? And 5 minutes later, we were swimming. That is like a real game changer.
Yeah. Wow. When we were there in July, it was super, super hot midday, and we were all kind of feeling exhausted, and it would have been so nice. Instead, we had to go to Terra Luna, which essentially you had to hop in, and it's still a bit of a distance, but that takes an hour too, where if you just want to go in and sit down, that is tremendous in terms of convenience.
And when we stayed at Stella Nova, we took the bus once and walked the other time, and it was it was a 10-minute walk, but you're in the other end of the park at that point, and that is totally manageable. And I think there's probably a big question, and no doubt a case for episode in, if you've got the money, do you spend it on staying in Stella Nova, Terra Luna, and buying an express pass, or staying in Helios, and not having an express pass? And I think that's probably going to be a future case for.
Okay, duly noted. So let's talk about that. You check into the hotel, and so when did you actually, what time of day did you actually walk into the park?
So we walked into the park around, I think it was probably like 4:35 p.m. So we'd landed, we got to the hotel, we checked in, we put our bags in the room. We went up to the bar at the top so we could kind of see the park, get our first view of the park from above. And the girls were super excited about visiting Mario. So we made our way to Mario. And if ever there were a land to give people a headache, that's it. But a headache is worth it, I feel. That the going up the escalator, just entering that park, it is beautiful. And I'm aware it will look more beautiful as those trees grow. And, when we were there, the weather wasn't so terrible. And I know that there's been lots of online discourse about the shade. And I never felt there was a lack of shade, but also it wasn't really hot enough that you needed shade. But going into Mario was spectacular as you would expect it to be, and within maybe 2 hours of landing in Orlando Airport, we were sat in Toad Cafe ordering some food, and me walking back to the hotel to get Aurora's water bottle.
Wow. Okay. And now, forgive me for putting this on the table immediately, but was everything operating? Were you guys able to ride things?
Yeah. So our plan was, we decided to buy an express pass for our next day, which was our full day. And that was not cheap. Bearing in mind, we've already paid for the park tickets, but I bought it for a few reasons, and we discussed this in the case for, if you want to go back and listen to that. But the main reasons were, I was worried about downtime, and was worried about the short time we had, and I wanted to be able to accomplish everything because I knew it would be at least a year or so before we come back, and we might not even visit Epic again until there's new stuff there. So I wanted to make our lives easy and have a nice vacation, so I splashed the cash, and so that day is going to be our express day. So the Wednesday night, the idea was we'll get into the park, we'll have dinner at Toad Cafe, which Aurora and Amory wanted to do. We decided to buy power-up bands, because we'll do some of the games.
Okay.
And then if there's short lines, we might jump on a ride or two, but we're just there to soak up the atmosphere and enjoy it that evening. And Mario and Yoshi, all the Mario Land rides were operational but running to a long line. So we did some power-up games. In fact, we managed to do enough in 30 minutes to be able to do the Bowser's Challenge, although we saved it for the next day. Yeah, because it was that time of day where I think everyone who wanted to do them had done them. Mm-hmm. So we were just sort of waiting maybe one or two groups before we were going on them. And they were a thing I ummed and ahed about buying, and they were really worth it. I mean, they're sat in a drawer now and won't be used again for another year. But actually, some of my fondest memories were playing the games as a family together. And I think you experienced this in Hollywood, right, Eric? And I think it's so often in a theme park, your memory is standing next to someone in a line or sitting next to them on a ride. And you don't interact that much. But actually playing those games and interacting as a family felt really special and a memory that solidified in my mind.
Yeah. You know, what also goes well, and you'll maybe realize this or not, there in this park there's not necessarily a ton for the littles or the olders, so it's like both spectrums. So our grandma loved going to Mario Land and with my little one, while we did some of the scary things or the hard roller coasters, and they beat every area in the land. So yeah, I feel it's one of those things that no one's talking about. Maybe if there was nothing else there, we'd be really more jazzed about it, but it is a really nice hidden feature that does take up a lot of decent time or fill in time for people who are like, well, there's not enough attractions. You could literally stay in there and just beat on, the blocks for an hour or so.
Yeah. Exactly, that is exactly right. And I think, there have been complaints leveled that there isn't enough in the park, and I think maybe that can be true, but having things like this and doing them, I think, it was worth the upcharge, and we really enjoyed it, and they were kind of, a fun moment that we weren't expecting to be as fun as it was.
I'm just curious, what band did you buy? Who's your character?
Aurora got Toad, and Amory got Princess Peach.
There we go. Okay.
And then us adults just use theirs.
Yeah, okay.
As you should, right?
Okay. So you came into the park at 5, you did the Toad Cafe and the interactive stuff. So how late were you in the park?
So we stayed, and I should point out, Amory is 8 and Aurora is 6. So we're kind of at that age where they and they still had a bit of jet lag, so we didn't want to go to bed too late. So we went from there, and I wanted to see Monsters lit up. So we went into Monsters Land, and it was a 5-minute wait for Monsters Unchained. Plus, there were only a few people waiting to see Frank and Bride of Frankenstein. So we went to do a little meet and greet with them, which was really good. You had a decent amount of time with them. They were funny. Aurora was quite scared, and they really tried to warm her up, but she was having none of it. But Amory really liked it and got that they were funny. And the shout out to the cast members who you give your phone to, who took so many photos and a few videos of the interaction. That was really special.
Wow.
Yeah, and then we went from there into Monsters Unchained, where we walked through the castle, and Aurora did not have a good time walking through the castle. I was carrying her the whole way through it. So they went to the family room, and me and Amory went on the ride, and then Amory got to go on again with Helen. And the second pre-show wasn't working with the Frankenstein animatronic, but every other animatronic in that ride was working. It was spectacular. I was really glad that I hadn't watched an on-ride video before going on it.
Okay, so and I'm assuming before you left Super Nintendo World, you at least got to see some of the nighttime lighting package for there.
Yes, it was sort of dusk time, so we got a bit of it lighting up, and then the next day we spent more time in the evening there.
Okay, so what did we think of Darkmoor at night with the lighting package?
It's beautiful. The Burning Blade Tavern wasn't burning, which is a shame. But I think unless you knew it was doing it, I don't think it really matters. I think it is like the whole of that park. It is beautifully realized. And the attention to detail is stunning. And, I think the fact that Aurora was scared to go anywhere near that land is sort of testament to it. I think it gives the spookies, even though she was fine in the end. And there's an interesting thing I think about the park and the family. I think Universal do their family room situation quite well, and they do it differently to Disney, where their thing is, if you don't know, if you've got a small child, you all go in the line together, and then just as you get to the station, there's a family room for one of you to wait in with your child, and then you switch. But the problem actually with Monsters is the ride was not as scary as walking through the castle. And I think that is a slight downside on something like that. Like, she was, in my arms sobbing as I'm walking her through the castle, and I'm trying to make it fun. I'm like, hey, look, think of the designers the designers sat at home in the office thinking about how do we scare people, and they'll be so happy that you're scared. But you kind of go like, oh yeah, there's that element which is a tricky one to deal with. That I wonder if I'd made a bit of a fuss, they would have another system, but I doubt it. But also it was a walk-on, so we were fine. And the ride is spectacular. And the first time that you really appreciate, and I think this is the big difference this park has shown, is in the development in theme park attractions and the development in visual technology of the difference between a projector and a screen.
Oh.
And that screen technology is high def enough, cheap enough, wonderful enough to be massive and feel totally immersive, and instead of it feeling like you're looking at a projection.
Yeah, I mean, we are definitely in that age now where, that once upon a time, a projected image was a projected image. And certainly in this ride, the mixing and matching they do between the animatronics, the practical props, and some of the walls of video are so huge, you can't help but be immersed in that moment of the attraction.
Yeah, I think it's stunning, and I think just the scale of everything is epic. Like, so many of those in dark rides in there, like just the size of those rooms is enough to make you go, whoa, let alone the animatronics and the practicals and the video and how well it all works together.
Okay, but again, this is your first, day in town. You've gone straight into the park. But again, when did you pack it in and head back to the Helios?
So I'd say we got back to the room probably around 8:15, 8:30, something like that. And then, straight to bed for the kids and ready for an early start the next morning for early entry.
There we go. And tell you what, folks, we're going to take a quick break here. And when we get back, we're going to do the Cox family's first full day in Epic Universe. But before that, there's this. And we're back. And just a reminder, folks, we're here with Chris Cox, who's discussing his family's first trip to Epic Universe, the park that, by the way, 1 year ago was in the middle of its first annual pass holder previews. So, all right, it's the next morning. Do we do breakfast at the hotel? Do we charge right into the park? What do we do?
Oh, no, Jim. We DoorDashed the night before, so we've got granola bars and we're up and ready to go.
Okay.
So the park opened early entry at 9. We thought we'll probably head down maybe 7:30, which was about the time we ended up going through the security checkpoints. And it's the first time where we'd done all the Face ID stuff, and that was all working. And there's a weird thing in that I never quite work out in Universal and throughout across the whole resort. Sometimes they'll be like, just walk on through. And the same with Express. They'll be like, come on through. Yeah, we've got you. And sometimes that system is utterly seamless and you don't even have to stop. And then sometimes they'll be like, hold on, you need your ID now and we need you to get your ticket out. And then it's suddenly a faff. And I've got no idea how that system suddenly goes, no, don't like your face. But on that morning, we walked straight through. We ate our granola bars and sat kind of on the side of the path as we were going into the park. And there were maybe a handful of people in front of us. Mm-hmm. And the next morning where we went in, we got there at 7:50, and there were still, barely enough people in front of you to make a difference.
Wow.
But that morning, the plan was to go to Mario first. So we had express passes, and we thought, from what we'd heard about Donkey Kong, you should maybe go to that first, but also we're aware that could be down. So we made the decision we'll do Mario Kart first, because equally what I'd heard was that you probably want to do it more than once because it can be a lot and confusing. And that's exactly what it was. So park opened with that lovely music and swell, and we headed to Mario Land, and we're aware at this point as well, if you're staying in Helios, actually Potter or Berk is where you want to go first because you're closer to them. So by the time we get to Mario, we've already got a swath of people who are early entrying from the main entry in front of us. But luckily, most of them go to Donkey Kong. We head into Mario Kart. We end up waiting maybe 15 minutes to go on to Mario Kart, at which point I check and realize that Donkey Kong is indeed down. So we made the right choice there. And that ended up being down for about an hour in that morning. So I think most of the early entry time it was down. So we did our first ride on Mario Kart was our first thing.
And as you mentioned, that's a ride that has a learning curve. How'd you do your first time?
I feel like I'm excited to see what they do with that technology next, but feel like this didn't quite. Probably, I imagine what they wanted it to be. I would imagine no one ended up with the product they quite wanted. And it's fun, but it's, I think you have to, if you want to play the game, you have to pay attention to the game and you don't really notice anything else. If you want to notice everything else, you ignore the game. But the girls enjoyed it. It's fun being in that world. I'm still not entirely sure whether I won or lost or what I was meant to do. We ended up doing it twice across our time there.
Okay.
But, it was fun. I think I'm glad we used our Express later in the day, so we did it again. The second time I didn't pay as much attention to the game, so could enjoy the effects and the practicals around it. And it was and it was nice that we hadn't realized that the girls, when we loaded up the app, then suddenly you see you start to go, we've got these trophies now because we went on the ride, and they were excited for that.
Yeah, I've done, so I was able to do it twice, maybe at Epic and then twice in Hollywood. And I feel like the third time and the fourth time you do it, you are it's not so much of a distraction. The first couple times, like you said, it is crazy. But once you kind of get it, then you can actually play the game and also enjoy it a little bit more. So it's a unique technology. It certainly is. And I don't really think there's anything else like it right now. But like you said, it'd be really cool to see how they're going to use that.
Yeah, and you see this a lot with theatre and various things I do where you go like, okay, this is the first version, and that's great because someone needs to do that to get that technology to the point where we can use it. Right, now what do we do with it? That's where stuff gets exciting.
Okay, now burying the needle in the other direction, did you guys do Yoshi? Because that
we did.
And
we, Yoshi is Yoshi. It is a kiddie ride, and my 6-year-old really enjoyed it, and she was excited to see Toad in it, and we ended up doing that twice. Once that I can't remember when we did that. We did an evening one, and then we did it with an express as well. But the second time we did it was very much I'd quite like a sit down. Should we go on Yoshi?
Okay,
you rested for 5 minutes.
There we go.
Yeah, I enjoyed those 5 minutes, and it's something for the littles. It's totally fine. I feel like no complaints, but I would be annoyed if I'd waited more than 30 minutes for that.
Got it. Okay. And speaking of waiting, how long before you finally got to do Donkey Kong? Was it something you had to circle back on to do later in the trip?
Yeah, we tried a few times in the day, and it's sort of that frustration of it was down a lot of the time, and then we were on the other side of the park when it's open, and there was twice we were like, let's go over and do Donkey Kong. And I think actually Epic is a very walkable park. It feels more like Disneyland compared to Magic Kingdom. Mm-hmm. It never felt like too much of a struggle to be in Berk and go like, let's head over to Mario. But what did feel like as a struggle was once you get into Mario to travel all the way back to Donkey Kong. The time we got there where it was open and running, where the line was 180 minutes, and going into Express, the lady was like, you're going to be waiting at least 90 minutes. And I'm like, I'm not. We've still got so much else to do. I'm not spending all this money to wait 90 minutes. We'll come back. Mm-hmm. And eventually staying on that, we circled back to it later in the day. We're like, well, now's the time to do it. The line was running at maybe 150 minutes. We got in the express line, which was out to the door. We slowly started moving. Then there was a rain delay. And we were like, we're just going to sit it out and wait. And eventually we ended up waiting about an hour 15 for Donkey Kong. Which I feel like was not worth it. The girls liked it. I ended up with bruises.
I was going to ask how your back was.
Yeah, I could go with the chiropractor. I got a bruise on my shoulder. And I feel that is a good example of you're a year in now. There's like the fact that the slightest bit of rain means that ride stops is still a problem. The operations need to be better. And I feel that we spent so much money on express passes. And I don't think... I don't want to feel entitled because of that, because you're not. But I think if you're spending that much money to then be spending an hour and 15 waiting for one of the rides isn't really good enough.
Got it. Got it. Now you mentioned the Isle of Berk.
Yes.
So after we did our morning at over at Super Nintendo World, where did we go? Was it Berk? Was it Ministry of Magic?
We did go to Berk there. So we got to Berk just as early entry was ending and joined the line to meet Hiccup at that point.
Okay.
Which was advertised at about 60 minutes and took us maybe 35.
Oh.
And we ate our granola bars as we waited in line and enjoyed watching the other interactions. And I'm really glad we did that. Again, the cast members who you give your phone to got some great photos and videos of that moment for us all. We enjoyed that. We were with Hiccup, who was great. Aurora was a little scared, and he was really good with her, building her up to like stroking Toothless. And it's a really, I think it's joyous, that moment. It feels so real. But I also like the warning that they give you, like, don't put your hands here, here, or here, which in my head is like, yes, it's a giant robot, it will kill you.
I mean, do you think this is the best character meet and greet, like, out of any theme park? Can you think of anyone that's better than that?
I think it's I think the interesting thing with the meet and greet is that you're given the opportunity, and it's annoying when you're waiting in line because everyone's given time with them. But, when we meet Disney characters, we're very aware of the time. So it's like, stand, quick hello, photo, move on. Because we feel bad for other people. But they give you more time than we would ever take, which I think is lovely. So you feel like you have a moment. And, we went to meet Princess Peach as well, and the girls were really happy to meet her, and she had a little something. And again, they give you slightly more time than we would ever take ourselves, which I think makes it feel special. I think,
yeah.
Cool. Okay. Now, speaking of the character interactions, did you get to see any of the little dragons, the pups, so to speak, out in the park? Or
sadly, we didn't see them. We saw the other animatronic dragons. The one that was, I think, meant to breathe ice wasn't breathing ice. But that whole land is, as has been said before, I think it's the sleeper hit of the park. It's so well designed. It's so immersive. The rides are fun. The food is great. We constantly found ourselves back in Berk just to soak up that atmosphere and enjoy that world.
And in fact, when we've been hearing about the Imagineers who are, being told that, for Disney Villains Land for the Kingdom, it's like, not Darkmoor, Berk. We want Berk.
Yeah.
Though what I find interesting about that is that they didn't tell them to do Ministry of Magic. And again, that being your side of the street, I wanted to ask what you thought of this park's Harry Potter area.
Spectacular. Huge. There was a moment where the brass band were out playing, and that felt like I was in Paris, and it felt really alive. I think we tried the butterbeer crepes, and I didn't think they were all that great. I think the problem was the crepe itself. It felt to me like not a fresh crepe, which is a great little tongue twister. And the ride is spectacular. We ended up going on it 3 times.
Wow. Okay.
I think you get a gold medal for that.
we did express pass for the first time on it, and that queue is amazing. The ride is technically impressive, but sort of soulless. A bit like watching a screensaver. Like, I enjoyed it and it looked good, but I didn't really feel any connection with it. And whilst it was entertaining, it wasn't necessarily fun. But we sort of all had a good time, and particularly like Aurora, who was slightly more scared of the rides at 6, she really enjoyed it.
Okay.
And it was the right level for her. And everything seemed to be working, bar the giant pendulum. And I think it's a technically impressive feat. And I feel like the problem is maybe just people don't really care about the story.
The irony here is, they wanted to do something that was set at the Ministry of Magic, because it's this very vivid thing from the Harry Potter film series and the books. Long story short, they didn't really have an idea for an attraction, but they did one anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement, and it's still fine. It's good. It's technically incredible. I just wish I connected a bit more emotionally.
Yeah.
So we did that using our express pass, and then the following morning, where we had early entry, we went to Berk second and went to Potter first on the early entry. And that morning we had a ride breakdown.
Oh, okay.
So we were on it. And here's what happened. No, we went to Berk for early entry the second morning because at one point in the day there were 6, both shows were down, and then 6 rides were down. We were like, all right, we'll go back to the hotel pool. And we'd also had the issue with Donkey Kong. And I was like, I'm just going to go to guest services and be like, here's my take on this, and I'm just sort of a bit disappointed that we spent all this money and we can't physically do anything at the minute. And they are very well accustomed, it seems, to this story, in that I didn't even need to fully explain the story. And they're like, here's 3 more via the express passes. One of them will let you on Potter or Donkey Kong. The other 2 will let you on everything. We're sorry. Which is great guest recovery, which meant we had an express pass to use on Potter the following day, which we did. And then we had an e-stop. But the e-stop for us came right at the end of the ride, just before the load station. And it's interesting because the ride stops instantly. The building lights come on, and in front of where the front of the lift or elevator is, the walls pop up to double height. So the front of it has a second wall behind it that pops up, so you can't lean over the edge. And we sit and we wait. And where we are, we're kind of just before the unload load station, just before kind of the broken clock thing that's there. So we'd seen the final scene. We'd done the whole ride. Yep. But the music didn't stop. And luckily, we were near the station, so we were in the station music, which is a longer loop than maybe the same 20 seconds we would have got earlier. But it also meant we couldn't hear any of the announcements which were taking place in the building. We didn't know whether the announcement was, just stand by, everything will be fine, or the announcement was, run, please run, get out of here. So eventually, after 10 minutes, we get moving again. And 10 minutes, it's fine. I wasn't that worried. I wasn't expecting anything out of 10 minutes. But as soon as we get to the station, the cast members handle it perfectly. Before anyone can do or say anything, they go, we know, we're so sorry. We wish it hadn't happened. We're going to give you all express passes. You can come on this again. We're so sorry. So instantly, everyone is relaxed and fine about it. I let them know, by the way, you can't hear any of the announcements because the music's still playing in the elevator, which seemed a surprise to them, so that was useful. But, in that thing, we then got another express so we could do it later in the day. I think they handled that beautifully well. I think that's exactly how that type of thing should be handled.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a pretty decent experience for given that you're getting stuck in with loud elevator music. A lot of people probably wouldn't want that as well.
Yeah.
I wanted to sort of to pivot to the other attraction in Ministry of Magic, which of course Circus Arcanus. Am I saying that name right?
Circanu, I think. I said it different every time. So.
Okay.
Arcanu. I think Arcanu.
Okay, the Circus Arcanu. And given that really is literally your side of the street, I was wondering what you thought of the show.
So I really liked the Dragon Show. I think it was the perfect length. It was spectacular, fun, enjoyable, really great theme park show. I wasn't disappointed by Arcanu, however we say it. I just thought it was fine. And I feel, having worked on a lot of theatre productions, some of which have become things and some of which have got to almost the point of being a thing and then not happened. It feels like I don't believe that is the show that they intended to present. And I think that's the show we got due to whatever reasons, technical, budget, time, money, any things. And it feels like it got to a point of like, well, that'll do because we're opening. And I'd like to see whether they circle back on that and fix some of the problems in it. And I think everyone's standing up for the pre-show. I like that Epic Universe seems to take lots of big swings and try new stuff. And that felt like, I'm glad they tried it. Doesn't quite work. And then the show itself, I think, is fine. But I feel like the circus, it's meant to be a circus. And there are lots of fantastic circus acts in the world. And it seems strange that there aren't any in that show. And the circus acts are fine, but they could be much better. And then for a show based in a world of magic, the magic is sort of lacking. The puppets are spectacular, but you've seen them in Isle of Berk, so it's more the same. The coup de théâtre, the stage moving, is great, but again, I've seen that in the West End. The screens are good, but again, it feels like for a show set in a world of magic, there needs to be more magic. And as someone who's worked on the Harry Potter and the Cursed Child plays, I know how difficult it is to teach actors that stuff and to create magic for a world where there are not tricks. Magic just exists. And it feels like with this one, they've got 80% of the way there and haven't done the 20%, which is the real hard work. And there can be many reasons why that would be. And I'm hopeful that maybe in the future they go back and again give that a little spruce up and a change.
As I understand it from chatting with folks on the creative side, what literally tripped them up here was that basically the wind went out of the sails of the Fantastic Beasts franchise.
Yeah, that makes sense.
After they'd made the big bet, they were, people forget that was originally announced as a 5-film series, and we got 3. And I want to say the director, David Heyman, I want to say, when asked about this, is like, sorry, the franchise is parked. Which polite way of saying, enjoy the 3. You're not getting the last 2.
That's all you get. And it's sort of an interesting time with the new HBO series coming out as well. You go like, okay, what is that a thing that Universal can pivot into? Do they have the rights for that version of it? Who knows? And is that a way they can then come back and do something with it? It's it'll be interesting to see. I think that show is fine, but it's not a thing you go to someone, you must go see this show. It's like, if you've got some time to kill and you want to sit in air conditioning, you can go and see it. You won't have a bad time.
Yeah. Okay. It seems compared to the Dragon show, which a lot of people are very much, this is something you want to see every single time. It seems like, the Arkanu is maybe once every couple trips. And I think with the different magic, it would be interesting to be like, if they could just have different acts. So it's kind of not the same show every single time you go around. It might be interesting to get more people in that way. Yeah.
I mean, that sort of is an interesting point on it, because it is a circus. So you can cycle acts in and out, and there are acts for hire. So where you could, it's an interesting thing. If they had the budget to do that, then that's an interesting way of actually being able to make it a bit more of a must-see.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay, now you mentioned earlier on in the show that you, you and the family, had a couple of meals in the park, and that, there were some that you really, really enjoyed, and then some that were kind of typical theme park fare. What stood out for you?
I think the PB&J mac and cheese cone. Obviously, there's a reason everyone talks about that. It is beautifully carb upon carb upon carb, but we liked it a lot. We really enjoyed Pizza Moon, particularly the brownie skillet. I had a really great in the burger place as you leave Harry Potter, Astro something, I forget its full name. But I had a really good sort of sloppy Joe brisket pulled pork thing, which was lovely. I think on the whole the food was much better than theme park food. I always think one of my favorite quick service restaurants in the world of theme park is Satuli Canteen in Animal Kingdom.
Yeah.
And I think this reaches those levels of like good, interesting, quality food. They have a lot of kids options, and I noticed in the other Universal parks the kids options are non-existent or very limited. It felt like they'd put time, money, and effort into that food, and it really paid off. There were things we'd like to eat and go back to eat there. We ate there 3 times. We had our evening meals in the park rather than in the hotel. I think everything was as good as you'd expect it to be at the worst, or better than you'd expect.
Okay. Now, I guess what I'd like to take a second to talk about here is the glue for the park here, the Celestial Park area. Now, obviously, when you were staying at Helios, you walked in the back, you had immediate access. And it was Celanova?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Okay, so you either walked over or took transportation to the front of the park. What did you think, when you entered the park that way? What was your take on sort of, how you guessed, most guests are introduced to this park?
I enjoyed it. I think it's weird that isn't my first impression of the park, and I think if it were your first impression, I think the soundtrack is wonderful. I think at night in particular it's spectacular. I think it'll look great when those trees grow a bit more. I think it looks inviting and fun, and walking along kind of through there to get to the lands is quite straightforward. I think Celestial Park, particularly at night, I think is really, really special, and Constellation Carousel is one of the sleeper hits. Like, we adored that ride. We went on it both nights before bed. And it felt like a really nice sort of a good night from the park. And I think I'm interested to see the rumor of going around of them opening Celestial Park a City Walk, where you can just go in there and dine in the restaurants, and they've got those restaurants which aren't open yet, and I would happily do that and soak up that atmosphere in that part of the park. It felt it feels really lovely, and in the day it feels a little more, I mean, it's fine. I feel like it's easy to cut across it, and it's quite pretty.
Okay.
And I like the water. I mean, that kinetic energy from the water. It's it's at night. It's really special, and in daytime, I think it's good.
All right. So to sort of bring things full circle here. So you did your homework, but at the same time, try to avoid spoilers. So our initial first impression of the park, are we headed back soon?
I would say it's very positive and we had a great time. And I wish there are certain things where I hope they fix it. And even things like, it's frustrating not to, when we went from Helios to Portofino Bay, it's annoying that there's no transportation option other than the bus, which has to take you to City Walk. So we just had to Uber between parks, which is, that thing which Disney do very well of transfer you between resorts. So I'd like them to sort that. But we had an extra, so we spent an evening in the park, a full day, another morning of early entry before switching to Portofino and going to those parks, and then an evening. And then we had the option of a final morning in the park. So we had a full day, 2 evenings and 1 morning. And we didn't take that final morning in the park. And we didn't spend as long in the other evening as we thought we might do in the park, because it felt like we'd done everything we wanted to do. And that's partly because we bought the express passes. But it also felt like there was nothing we really I really want to go on that again. And we went on every ride. In fact, Anne-Marie, our eldest at 8, did her first big roller coasters of going on Stardust, and she went on both because we did a rider swap, and Helen and I went on one each. And there was a point at the end of that where I looked at her face and I was like, this is either going to burst into a big smile or a load of tears. And luckily it burst into a big smile, and she loved it. And I think there's a thing that we forget about theme parks, of how wonderful they are. But as taking your child to a theme park is a perfectly safe environment for them to be brave and to test their limits and try things. And I feel like it helps children grow emotionally, psychologically, by being able to accomplish those sorts of challenges. And I think Epic has a good level of being able to do that. For Aurora, it was Hiccup's Wing Gliders, which is an amazing coaster. Yeah. But the first time she went on it, she didn't really love it, but she went on it, and then she was like, I don't really want to go on it again. And they're like, well, you don't have to, but if you want to come on with us as a family. And she's like, okay, I think I will. And then the second time she loved it. Oh. And then put her hands up on it, and you go like, that's what, those levels of rides at all those different points are great. And next time she wants to go on Werewolf, which actually turned out to be a really fun roller coaster. So it's good for all those things. But we didn't feel like we needed the extra time. And I think we'll be back in Orlando next year. And whether or not we visit Epic, I think we'd have a nice time there, but I don't feel like we have to go again until there's something new.
Wow. Well, no, I love those insights about, a safe environment for a kid to be brave and sort of push out their borders. No, I love that.
It seems like he's going to be making the next Universal ad campaign, right, Chris?
There we go.
I'm very much available.
Okay. And forgive me for working in a plug for your other show here at Jim Hill Media, The Case For with Chris Cox. But if you were going to lay down a verdict about Epic Universe, 1 year in, so to speak, what would your thoughts be?
I would say it is the most technologically advanced new theme park in the world. So it's exciting because of that. And it feels like I'm excited about the future of theme parks because of what they have done at Epic Universe. And I think on the whole, it has been incredibly successful. And yes, there are issues and problems, and it is easy to think about them rather than anything else. But overall, I think it is a really accomplished, exciting, immersive, fun, enjoyable theme park, which has taken things to the next level and will now lead a whole brigade of new stuff because of it. And I think, yes, it's easy to focus on downtime problems and this and that, but actually overall, we had a great time. And yes, I'd rather not have had to spend a fortune on express passes and those things. And I think you could probably avoid that if you did early entry and stayed late, and you would be fine. But I feel like it is, it is my overall thoughts when I look at it. I go like, it is a really great day out. And really, at the end of the day, that's what you're after.
There we go. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Cox, thanks again for coming on the Epic Universal podcast and sharing your thoughts about their fourth park in Florida, third, who knows. Thanks to Chris Cox for, coming on Epic Universal podcast with myself and Mr. Hersey and sharing his thoughts on Epic Universe. And with that, folks, that's going to do it for this week's show. And by the way, if you have any suggestions for topics that you'd like Eric and I to discuss on future episodes of this podcast, feel free to send those along via social media. And I guess that's going to do it for this week. So thanks for listening. And Mr. Hersey and I will be back next week.